The $200,000 grand piano in the marble atrium of Sterling Technologies was never supposed to be touched during work hours. It was a trophy, a centerpiece, a symbol of power, sitting silent in a fortress of glass and steel, rising 47 stories into the Chicago sky. But at 6:42 on a Tuesday morning in late October, someone broke that rule. Michael Torres pushed his maintenance cart through the employee entrance, the wheels squeaking against polished floors that reflected the sunrise filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. The building stretched above him like a monument to ambition, every surface gleaming with the kind of perfection that required someone to clean it at hours when ambition slept. Inside, everything smelled faintly of expensive coffee that hadn't been brewed yet and leather furniture that cost more than his annual salary. This was the kingdom of Elizabeth Sterling, one of the most powerful women in sustainable energy technology. Her company had revolutionized battery storage, turned billion-dollar losses into industry dominance, and crushed competitors who underestimated her. But Michael wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about Sophia. His 10-year-old daughter had been up late the night before, crying over her piano practice. The piece her teacher assigned was too difficult. Her small fingers kept stumbling over the complicated runs through Debussy's Clair de Lune, bars 15 through 20, where the melody cascaded like water over stones. She'd slammed the cheap keyboard keys in frustration, the plastic clattering hollow and thin, before running to her room. The door had shut with finality that felt like giving up. Michael had sat outside that door for 20 minutes, not knowing what to say, because he understood. He understood what it felt like when your fingers couldn't translate what your heart was trying to express, when the music in your head refused to flow through your hands, when the gap between dream and reality felt impossibly wide, a chasm you couldn't cross, no matter how hard you reached. His mother had been a piano teacher, not famous, but devoted. Linda Torres had taught in the basement of St. Michael's Church 3 afternoons a week for 40 years, charging whatever families could pay. Sometimes $5, sometimes a casserole, sometimes nothing but gratitude. She'd taught Michael everything she knew about theory, technique, the architecture of sound. "Music isn't about perfect notes, son," she used to say, while guiding his small hands across the keys of their battered upright. "It's about honest ones. Play what you feel, not what you think people want to hear." But she died when Michael was 17. Cancer, fast and merciless, the kind that gave you 3 months' warning and no chances. And with her went the music, or at least Michael's connection to it. He'd tried to keep playing, tried to honor her memory by practicing the pieces she loved. But between working 3 jobs to support himself, then later working to support Sophia after Jennifer left them both, the piano became something he could only touch in stolen moments. Late nights when Sophia was asleep, early mornings before anyone else was awake, fragments of a life that used to be whole. Now, as he guided his cart across the pristine lobby, Michael's eyes drifted toward the Steinway Model D sitting in the center of the atrium. It was breathtaking. 9 feet of polished ebony perfection, the kind of instrument most pianists dreamed about but never got to touch. He'd been working night shift maintenance here for 2 years, cleaning every floor, emptying every trash can, polishing every surface until it gleamed. The work was honest. It paid enough to keep Sophia fed, clothed, and in lessons with Mrs. Foster. But sometimes, when the building was empty and silent, he would stop beside that piano and just look at it. Never touch. The rules were clear. The piano was for professional performers during company events and charity galas, not for staff, especially not for the janitor. Until today. Maybe it was Sophia's tears from the night before. Maybe it was the weight of too many dreams deferred, pushed aside, buried under the necessity of survival. Maybe it was just the way the morning light hit those ivory keys, making them glow like an invitation he couldn't refuse. Michael set down his cleaning supplies. He glanced around the empty atrium. The building wouldn't come alive for another 30 minutes at least. The first wave of employees wouldn't arrive until 7. Management never showed up before 8. He had time, just a minute. Just one song to remember what it felt like when music actually worked, when fingers found the right notes and the world made sense. He sat down on the bench. The leather was soft, expensive, completely foreign to his work-worn hands. His fingers hovered above those perfect keys. Michael took a breath and began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece his mother had played at her last recital before the cancer made her too weak to lift her arms. 3 floors above, Elizabeth Sterling was already at war. Her corner office overlooked the entire city, a strategic position for someone who built an empire by staying 3 steps ahead of everyone else. The sun was barely up, but she'd been working for over an hour already. Conference call with the London office at 5:30. Emails to the Tokyo distribution team. A presentation that needed to be perfect before the board meeting at 9. Elizabeth didn't sleep much. Sleeping felt like surrender, like admitting there were hours in the day she couldn't control. At 52, she'd spent 3 decades clawing her way to the top of an industry that tried everything to keep her down. Too young when she started, too female always, too ambitious, too uncompromising, too unwilling to smile and nod and let men take credit for her ideas. She'd proved them all wrong, every single one. But it cost her. A marriage that imploded under the weight of her 100-hour weeks. Friendships that faded into polite holiday cards from people who stopped inviting her to things because she never came. A relationship with her father that ended in bitter silence before he died, the last words between them sharp enough to cut. She told herself it was worth it. Success required sacrifice. Her father had chosen music and passion and ended up poor, playing piano at weddings for $200 while her mother grew resentful and hard. Elizabeth had chosen differently. She built something that couldn't be taken away. Something solid. Something that proved she was more than Samuel Sterling's disappointing daughter who abandoned art for commerce. Her assistant, Sarah Kim, knocked softly on the doorframe. "The quarterly reports are ready, and Robert from legal needs 5 minutes about the Singapore contract." Elizabeth nodded without looking up from her laptop screen. "Tell him I'll call at 7:30, and I need the environmental impact study on my desk before—" She stopped. "Do you hear that?" Sarah frowned, tilting her head. "Hear what?" Elizabeth stood, moving toward the window. Music, faint, delicate, drifting up through the ventilation system like smoke. Piano music, unmistakable and impossible. Someone's playing the atrium piano. Sarah's eyes widened. "At this hour? That's not possible. The building's barely open." Elizabeth's expression hardened into something cold and sharp. That piano was hers, a statement piece, part of the carefully crafted aesthetic that told clients and competitors exactly who they were dealing with. It wasn't a toy for staff to touch whenever they felt like it. During the annual charity gala, they hired professional pianists. During corporate events, it provided background ambiance played by vetted performers who understood its value. But at 6:45 in the morning, someone was taking liberties that weren't theirs to take. "Come with me." They took the executive elevator down. As they descended, the music grew clearer, richer, more complex. Elizabeth's jaw tightened. Whoever was playing knew what they were doing, which somehow made the violation worse. The elevator doors opened onto the mezzanine level, overlooking the atrium. A handful of early employees had already gathered along the railing, looking down with smiles Elizabeth found deeply inappropriate given the circumstances. She moved through them like a blade. Below, in the center of the marble floor, sat a man in a maintenance uniform. His cart was parked nearby, mop leaning against the wall like he'd just set it down. His eyes were closed. His fingers moved across the keys with a confidence that didn't match his position, his station, his right to be there at all. The melody was extraordinary. Elizabeth felt something twist in her chest, a sensation she hadn't experienced in so long she almost didn't recognize it. She knew this piece. Her father used to play it. Sunday mornings in their small house outside Boston, before the money problems got bad, before her mother's bitterness poisoned everything. Her father had an old upright piano. Sunlight would stream through thin curtains while he played Chopin, like he was sharing a secret with the world. Elizabeth had been 7 years old, sitting on the floor beside him, watching his hands dance across keys that were chipped and yellowing, but still made beauty. "Why do you play sad songs, Daddy?" "They're not sad, sweetheart. They're true. There's a difference." She hadn't understood then. But standing here now, listening to this stranger play the same piece in her corporate fortress, she understood perfectly. The music was true. It didn't hide or pretend or perform for approval. It simply was. And it hurt to hear because it reminded her of everything she'd buried to become successful. Elizabeth's hand tightened on the railing. "Who is that?" Sarah checked something on her tablet, scrolling quickly. "Michael Torres, night shift maintenance. He's been with us for 2 years. 2 years. This man had been cleaning her building for 2 years, and she'd never noticed him, never saw him as anything but part of the infrastructure that kept Sterling Technologies running smoothly. Now she couldn't look away. The way he leaned into the difficult passages, the way his shoulders relaxed during the gentle moments, the way he seemed to disappear into the music like it was the only real thing in the world, and everything else was just noise. She felt anger rising, but not at him. At herself, for forgetting what this felt like, for building a life so loud with ambition that she'd stopped hearing anything beautiful, for becoming exactly what her father had accused her of being during their last fight, someone who knew the price of everything and the value of nothing. The song ended. Silence filled the atrium like water rushing into a vacuum. Michael opened his eyes slowly, as if waking from a dream. Then he noticed the people watching from above. His face went pale. He stood quickly, stepping away from the piano, like it might burn him. Elizabeth moved before she could think. She walked down the wide staircase, her heels clicking against marble with the rhythm of inevitability. Every employee turned to watch. They knew that walk, that expression. Someone was about to get destroyed, and they were grateful it wasn't them. Michael saw her coming. He straightened, hands clasped in front of him like a man awaiting execution. Elizabeth stopped 3 feet away. Up close, she could see the details her overview had missed. Calluses on his fingers, the kind that came from both manual labor and piano practice. Tiredness around his eyes, the exhaustion of someone who worked while others slept, the careful posture of someone used to being invisible, to taking up as little space as possible in a world that didn't want him noticed. "That piano is not for staff use." Michael's voice came out quiet, but steady. "I know. I'm sorry. Do you have any idea what that instrument costs?" "No, ma'am. $200,000. Michael's eyes widened slightly, the number clearly beyond anything he'd imagined. "I was careful with it. That's not the point." "I understand." Elizabeth crossed her arms, falling back on the armor of authority, because vulnerability felt dangerous. "You work here? Maintenance?" "Yes, ma'am. Night shift." "Then explain to me why you thought it was acceptable to sit down at a restricted instrument in the middle of my building during work hours." Michael met her eyes, His gaze was steady, not defiant, not ashamed, just honest in a way that caught her off guard, because I needed to. The answer was so unexpected that Elizabeth actually took a half step back. Several employees nearby tried to hide their reactions, failing completely. You needed to? Yes, ma'am. That's not an explanation. Michael glanced at the piano, then back at her. My daughter's struggling with her piano lessons. She was crying last night because she can't get the notes right in Clair de Lune. I wanted to remember what it feels like when the music works, when your hands do what your heart wants them to do. So maybe I could help her remember too. The silence stretched. Elizabeth felt that crack in her armor widen. This man had just violated company policy, broken an explicit rule, and his reason was love, not rebellion or entitlement or disrespect. Just a father trying to help his daughter believe in something difficult. You have a daughter? Yes, ma'am. Sophia. She's 10, and she takes piano lessons. Yes, ma'am. It was her choice, not mine. I didn't push her into it. Why piano? Michael smiled faintly, and Elizabeth saw something soften in his face that made him look younger despite the tiredness. She says it makes her feel close to her grandmother, my mother. She passed away before Sophia was born, but I told Sophia stories about her, about the music, about how my mom could make a room full of strangers feel something true just by playing honestly. Elizabeth's throat tightened. She understood that loss intimately, the weight of carrying someone's memory while trying to move forward, the impossible task of honoring the dead while building a life they'd never see. And you? Do you play professionally? No, ma'am, but you play like someone who could. Michael shrugged, a gesture that contained years of abandoned dreams. Life doesn't always go the way we plan. Elizabeth knew that truth with the certainty of lived experience. She looked around the atrium. Every employee on every visible floor was watching now, waiting to see what she would do. Fire him, humiliate him, make an example so no one else would dare touch what belonged to her. That's what the old Elizabeth would have done. The woman who built walls so high, nothing could touch her. The CEO who never showed weakness because weakness got you crushed. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the music still echoing in her memory. Maybe it was the way Michael stood there without trying to manipulate her, without making excuses, just being honest about a moment of human weakness that turned into something beautiful. Maybe it was the ghost of her father's hands on piano keys, the memory of Sunday mornings before everything fell apart. Your daughter, she's struggling with Clair de Lune? Michael nodded. The piece is advanced for her level, but her teacher, Mrs. Foster, believes she can do it. I'm not sure if that's encouragement or cruelty. What piece specifically? Debussy, the one everyone knows. Elizabeth nearly laughed. Of course it was Debussy's masterpiece. Beautiful, impossible, the kind of music that breaks your heart even when played perfectly. That is advanced for a 10-year-old. Yes, ma'am. Elizabeth made a decision that surprised her even as the words left her mouth. Bring her here. Michael blinked, clearly not understanding. I'm sorry. Your daughter. Bring her here on Saturday morning. 10 o'clock. Why? Because this building is empty on weekends. Because that piano deserves to be played by someone who actually cares about music instead of sitting here as decoration. And because maybe if she plays in a space like this, on an instrument like this, she'll remember why she started. Michael stared at her like she'd just spoken a language he didn't know existed. You're serious? I don't joke about piano, Mr. Torres. A slow smile spread across his face, genuine and unguarded in a way that made Elizabeth's chest ache. Thank you. Really, thank you. Elizabeth nodded curtly, already regretting the impulse, but unable to take it back. Then she did something that shocked everyone watching, including herself. She sat down on the piano bench, her pencil skirt and designer blouse looking absurd next to the massive instrument. Her manicured nails hovered over the keys like she was approaching something dangerous. "Play it again." Michael hesitated, confusion clear on his face. "The Chopin." "Why?" Elizabeth's voice dropped to something almost vulnerable, a tone she never used in this building. "Because my father used to play that piece, and I haven't heard it in 20 years. Not played like that, not played true." Understanding passed between them in the silence. Two people carrying ghosts. Two people who buried their music under the weight of survival and loss and the relentless forward march of time. Michael sat beside her on the bench. The employees watching leaned forward collectively. This was unprecedented. Elizabeth Sterling, the Ice Queen CEO, sitting shoulder to shoulder with a janitor at a piano like they were equals in something that mattered more than org charts. "I'll play the melody. You take the harmony if you remember it." Michael's fingers found the opening notes, gentle and inviting. Elizabeth's hands trembled slightly above the keys. 35 years since she'd played. 35 years since her father died 3 days after their final argument, taking with him any chance to apologize for telling him his life was wasted, that his dedication to music was just cowardice disguised as passion. "It's like riding a bike," people say. Elizabeth knew that was a lie. People told themselves to feel better about abandoned skills. "Then, let's find out together." Michael played the opening phrase. Elizabeth closed her eyes and remembered her father's hands guiding hers when she was small. "Don't think, sweetheart. Just feel. Let your hands remember what your head forgot." Her mother's voice from the kitchen, softer then, before the resentment calcified into permanent bitterness. "Play it again, you two. It's beautiful." The smell of Sunday breakfast, the warmth of being loved, the simplicity of a life before ambition turned her into armor. Her fingers found the keys, clumsy at first, uncertain, muscle memory buried under decades of neglect. But then something clicked. The harmony line emerged, hesitant but present. She was playing, not well, not even competently by any professional standard, but honestly, and that mattered more. The two of them together, a CEO and a janitor, a woman who forgot how to feel and a man who never stopped feeling, created something fragile and real in the middle of a building designed to crush weakness. The employees didn't applaud this time. They just listened, because what they were hearing wasn't a performance. It was two people remembering who they used to be before life taught them to hide. When the song ended, Elizabeth sat very still. Tears she didn't know she was holding slipped down her cheeks. She wiped them away, quickly, embarrassed by the display, even though it felt necessary. "I'm sorry. That was honest." Elizabeth laughed, a sound she hadn't made in years. Real laughter, not the practiced corporate chuckle or the sharp bark of victory. Just joy at being seen. "Your mother taught you well." "She did. My father tried. I didn't listen. You listened. You just forgot. There's a difference." Elizabeth looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Stay this kind after everything life takes from you." Michael thought about that, about his mother's death, about Jennifer walking out when Sophia was barely more than a baby, leaving a note that said she was drowning and couldn't breathe in this life anymore, about working 3 jobs and still barely making rent, about dreams that turned into dust you swept up and threw away because there was no room for them in reality. I have a daughter who still believes in magic. I can't let her see me stop believing too. Elizabeth's chest ached with something she'd been avoiding for decades. She'd never had children, never let herself want them. Success required sacrifice, remember? But sitting here now, she wondered what she'd actually sacrificed. And for what? Money she didn't spend because she had no time to enjoy it. Power she couldn't share because she trusted no one. A legacy with no one to inherit it except shareholders who'd sell the company for parts the moment she was gone. She stood abruptly, retreating back into the safety of business. Saturday, 10 o'clock. Security will have your names. Bring your daughter. Michael stood too. We'll be here. Elizabeth paused, something softening in her expression for just a moment. And, Mr. Torres? Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the reminder. She didn't explain what she meant. She didn't need to. Michael understood in the way that people who've lost important things always understand each other. As Elizabeth walked back toward the elevators, the employees parted. They'd just witnessed something impossible. Their untouchable CEO had cried, had played piano with a janitor, had laughed, had been human. Sarah hurried to catch up, tablet clutched against her chest. Ma'am, the call with Robert about Singapore. Reschedule it. The quarterly reports later. But the board meeting at 9. Elizabeth stopped walking, turning to face her assistant. Sarah, when was the last time you did something just because it made you feel alive? Not productive or strategic or career advancing, just alive. Sarah blinked, clearly unprepared for the question. I don't know. Figure it out. Life's too short to only live in spreadsheets. Elizabeth continued to the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of Michael returning to his maintenance cart, back to invisibility, back to the life that kept him from piano except in stolen moments. But Saturday, she thought, Saturday would be different. Michael finished his shift at 2 in the afternoon, his body aching from 8 hours of cleaning, but his heart feeling strangely light. He thought about calling Sophia's school, pulling her out early, telling her about the piano and Saturday, and the impossible thing that happened this morning. But he decided to wait. Better to surprise her. Better to give her something to look forward to without the anxiety of anticipation. He picked her up at 3:15, like always. Sophia ran out of PS 134 Elementary with her backpack bouncing, dark hair flying loose from the ponytail she'd started the day with. Daddy. He caught her in a hug, breathing in the smell of school cafeteria and playground and childhood. Hey, sweetheart, how was your day? Boring. Math is stupid. And Emma said, my shoes are ugly. Your shoes are perfect. That's what dads have to say. Doesn't make it less true. They walked to the bus stop hand in hand. The October air was crisp, leaves skittering across the sidewalk in colors that reminded Michael of piano wood, of autumn recitals his mother used to organize at the church. Piano lesson today? Sophia's face fell, all the lightness draining out. Yeah, I don't want to go. Why not? Because I hate Claire de Lune. I'm never going to get it right. I want to tell Mrs. Foster I quit. You don't want to quit? Yes, I do. They reached the bus stop. Michael knelt down to her level, right there on the sidewalk, ignoring the other people waiting. Sophia, look at me. She did. Those serious brown eyes that looked so much like his mother's. What if I'm not good enough? Michael's heart broke clean through. This fear he knew, this certainty of inadequacy that poisoned everything beautiful. You are good enough. You know how I know? How? Because being good at piano isn't about perfect notes. It's about honest ones. Your grandma taught me that. You play what you feel, and that's already more than most people can do. But I keep messing up. Everybody messes up. That's how you learn. Mrs. Foster doesn't mess up. Mrs. Foster practiced for 50 years. You've practiced for 2. Give yourself time. Sophia considered this, the fierce intelligence behind her young face working through the logic. Did you mess up when you were learning? All the time. Really? Really? I once played an entire recital with the sheet music upside down. Sophia giggled despite herself. No, you didn't. I absolutely did. Your grandma laughed so hard she cried. Was she mad? Not even a little. She said mistakes make the best stories. Sophia smiled, that beautiful smile that made every hardship worth enduring. Okay, I'll try one more week. That's my girl. They took the bus to Mrs. Foster's studio on the west side, a converted garage that smelled like old wood and rosin. Margaret Foster was 70 years old, tiny and fierce, with white hair pulled into a severe bun and glasses that made her eyes look enormous. She'd been teaching piano for 50 years and didn't tolerate excuses or self-pity. You're late. 3 minutes. 3 minutes is late. Sophia set down her backpack and went to the old upright piano that dominated the small space. Mrs. Foster looked at Michael with eyes that saw too much. She's been struggling. I know. The piece is hard. I know. She wants to quit. I know. Are you going to let her? Michael met the old woman's eyes, seeing the test beneath the question. No. Mrs. Foster nodded approvingly. Good. Quitting is easy. Fighting is how we grow. She turned to Sophia. All business. Clair de lune. From the top. Slowly. Sophia's small fingers found the opening notes, hesitant and uncertain. She made it 8 bars before stumbling. Mrs. Foster's voice cut through without sympathy. Again. Sophia tried again. Same mistake. Again. By the 5th attempt, tears were forming in Sophia's eyes. Michael wanted to intervene, to tell Mrs. Foster to ease up, to protect his daughter from frustration, but he didn't, because he knew this was necessary. The struggle was part of the music, part of learning anything worth knowing. On the 6th attempt, something shifted. Sophia's fingers found the rhythm. The notes flowed. For 16 beautiful bars, she played it perfectly. Then she stumbled again. But Mrs. Foster was smiling, which was rarer than perfect technique. There, you felt it, didn't you? Sophia nodded, wiping her eyes. It felt right, because it was. That feeling, that moment of connection, that's what we're chasing, not perfection. Truth. After the lesson, walking to the bus stop in the gathering dusk, Sophia was quiet. You okay, sweetheart? Yeah. What are you thinking about? Mrs. Foster said I almost had it. You did. I heard it. Will you help me practice? Michael's throat tightened. Their apartment didn't have a piano. They had a $40 Yamaha keyboard from a garage sale with keys that stuck and tinny speakers that made everything sound like a toy, but it was all they could afford. Of course I'll help. That night, after dinner, they practiced together in their one-bedroom apartment. Michael played the melody on his phone while Sophia tried to match it on the keyboard, over and over. Mistakes and corrections, frustration and breakthrough. Finally, at 9 o'clock, Sophia yawned. Bedtime, sweetheart. 5 more minutes. You said that 20 minutes ago. She smiled sleepily. Okay. Michael tucked her into bed, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Daddy? Yeah? Do you think Grandma would be proud of me? Michael's heart squeezed so hard he could barely breathe. She would be so proud, she'd probably cry. Really? Really? You know what she'd say? What? Michael used his best impression of his mother's voice, gentle and full of warmth. That's my granddaughter. Listen to her play. She's got magic in her fingers, just like her daddy did. Sophia giggled. You sound silly. Your grandma was a little silly. I wish I could have met her. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Sophia's eyes drifted closed. Michael sat beside her bed until her breathing deepened into sleep. Then he went to the kitchen. Their apartment was small, the one bedroom that Sophia had. the living room where Michael slept on a pull-out couch, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, but it was theirs, clean and safe and filled with love, which had to be enough. He made coffee and sat at the tiny table, thinking about the morning, about Elizabeth Sterling sitting beside him at that piano, about Saturday, about the chance to give Sophia something he couldn't afford, but she desperately needed. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? A woman's voice, professional and familiar. Mr. Torres, this is Sarah Kim, assistant to Ms. Sterling. Yes? Miss Sterling asked me to confirm Saturday's arrangement. 10 a.m. You and your daughter will be there. Perfect. Please bring ID for building security. And, Mr. Torres, yes? Sarah's voice softened slightly. Ms. Sterling also wanted me to tell you something. What's that? She said to thank you for reminding her what music sounds like. Michael smiled into the phone. Tell her she's welcome. After hanging up, Michael sat in the quiet for a long time. Outside, the city hummed with traffic and sirens and the relentless forward march of other people's lives. But inside this small apartment, something had shifted. For the first time in years, Michael felt like maybe the music wasn't over. Maybe it was just waiting for the right moment to begin again. He looked at the cheap keyboard against the wall, at Sophia's sheet music scattered on the couch, at the life he'd built from scraps and sacrifice and stubborn refusal to give up. And he smiled. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in October sunshine that turned Chicago's skyline into something worth photographing. Michael woke at 6 out of habit, his body still programmed for night shifts even though he'd transitioned to days 3 weeks ago. The promotion to facilities manager had come through Sarah Kim's phone call, professional and brief, with Elizabeth's fingerprints all over it, even though she'd never admit to the interference. Better hours meant seeing Sophia off to school every morning, helping with homework at the kitchen table, instead of leaving notes on the refrigerator, eating dinner together like families in movies instead of ships passing in the exhausted dark. He lay on the pull-out couch, listening to the city wake up, wondering if he'd made a mistake telling Sophia about today. She'd been so excited Thursday night when he finally explained about the piano, about Elizabeth Sterling, about the chance to practice on an instrument that cost more than everything they owned combined. Sophia hadn't slept much since. She'd talked about it nonstop at school, during dinner, while brushing her teeth. The fancy building, the expensive piano, the CEO, who looked scary but wasn't really. What if I mess up? Then you mess up. Miss Sterling didn't invite you there to judge you. She invited you to play. But what if she changes her mind when she hears me? Michael had thought about Elizabeth sitting beside him at that piano, tears on her face, hands trembling as she remembered how to touch keys she'd abandoned decades ago. She won't. She understands what music means, and people who understand that don't care about perfect. They care about real. Now watching morning light creep across their small living room, Michael hoped he was right. He made breakfast quietly, pancakes shaped like music notes that came out looking more like abstract blobs. But Sophia wouldn't care. She loved pancakes no matter what shape they pretended to be. At 7:30, her door creaked open. She appeared in pajamas, with her hair sticking up in 17 different directions, eyes still puffy with sleep. Is it time? Not yet, sweetheart. We don't leave until 9:30. That's forever from now. That's 2 hours. Like I said, forever. Michael smiled and guided her to the table. She ate her pancakes slowly, deliberately, like someone trying to make time move faster through sheer force of will. Can I wear my blue dress, the one from Aunt Sarah's wedding? That's pretty fancy for piano playing. It's a fancy piano." Michael couldn't argue with that logic. At 9:15, they were both dressed. Sophia in her blue dress with her hair brushed smooth and pulled back with a clip that had tiny butterflies on it. Michael in his only pair of nice jeans and a button-down shirt his mother had given him 15 years ago that somehow still fit, though the collar was fraying and one button was mismatched. They took the train downtown, Michael holding Sophia's hand as she pressed her face against the window, watching the city scroll past. Her knee bounced nervously, her fingers drummed silent scales on her leg. "You're going to be great. You have to say that. I mean it. What if my hands get sweaty? Then wipe them on your dress." "Daddy, what?" "It's practical." She giggled despite her nerves, which was exactly what Michael had hoped for. The train pulled into the station 3 blocks from Sterling Technologies. They walked through streets that smelled like coffee and fresh bread from bakeries opening for Saturday morning customers. The October air was crisp and clean, autumn showing off before winter arrived to ruin everything. As they rounded the corner, the building came into view. Sophia stopped walking. Wow! The tower stretched into the sky like something from a dream, glass and steel catching the sunlight, a monument to ambition and success that made their entire apartment building look like a toy. "That's where you work?" "Yeah, it's so big. Wait until you see the inside." They walked through the main entrance. Marcus Johnson, the security guard who usually worked weekdays, looked up from his desk and smiled wide. "Torres, didn't expect to see you on a Saturday. Special occasion?" "This is my daughter, Sophia." Marcus's eyes lit up. "The piano player! Miss Sterling told me to expect you. Let me see some ID, please." Michael handed over his driver's license. Marcus checked something on his computer, nodded, and printed 2 visitor badges. "You're all set. Atrium's open. Ms. Sterling said to make yourselves comfortable." "She's not here yet?" "Not yet, but she called this morning to confirm everything was ready for you." They took the elevator to the main floor. The doors opened onto the massive atrium, and Sophia's hand tightened around Michael's. The space was even more impressive empty. Their footsteps echoed on marble. Morning light streamed through the glass ceiling, making everything glow with a quality that felt almost sacred. And in the center, like a jewel in a crown, sat the Steinway. Sophia approached it slowly, reverently, like she was afraid sudden movement might make it disappear. "Can I touch it? That's why we're here." She reached out one finger and pressed middle C. The note rang through the empty space, pure and perfect and alive. Her face transformed, wonder replacing nervousness. "It sounds different than Mrs. Foster's piano." "Better, just different, bigger somehow." Michael understood. Every piano had its own voice, its own personality. This one spoke with power and precision that their $40 keyboard couldn't even approximate. "Want to try the piece?" Sophia's eyes went wide. "Now? Why not? We have the place to ourselves." She looked around the enormous atrium, then back at the piano. Fear crept into her expression, the same fear Michael had seen Thursday night when she'd slammed the keyboard keys in frustration. "I am scared." "Of what? What if I disappoint you?" Michael knelt down beside her, eye level, hands on her shoulders. "Sophia, listen to me. You could sit at this piano and play nothing but wrong notes for an hour, and I would still be the proudest dad in the world. You know why? Why? Because you're trying. Because you didn't give up even when it was hard. Because you're standing here in this beautiful building about to do something brave. That's what matters, not the notes, the courage." Sophia threw her arms around his neck. "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart." She pulled back and wiped her eyes, determination replacing doubt. Okay, I'll try. She climbed onto the bench. Her feet didn't quite reach the pedals, so Michael adjusted the seat height slightly. Her small hands spread across the keys, positioning themselves over the opening notes of Clair de Lune. She took a breath and began to play. The opening notes floated through the atrium like morning mist, soft and delicate, uncertain at first, but growing more confident with each measure. Michael watched his daughter disappear into the music the same way he did, the same way his mother had. It was genetic, this need to translate emotion into sound, to speak the language that existed before words. Sophia made it through the first section without any major mistakes. When she reached bars 15 through 20, the passage that always tripped her up in practice, she slowed down deliberately. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration, a habit she'd had since she was 3. She thought through each note, feeling her way across the difficult terrain, and she played through it. Not perfectly. A few notes were hesitant, the rhythm wavered, but she played through it, which was its own kind of victory. When she finished the passage and moved into the next section, Michael saw her shoulders relax. She'd cleared the mountain. The rest was downhill. The music swelled and faded, rose and fell, painted pictures in the air of moonlight on water, of beauty that moved and shimmered and refused to hold still. Then it was over. The final notes hung in the silence like stars. Sophia turned on the bench, her face flushed. "I did it. You absolutely did. I only messed up twice. I only counted one mess up." "Really? Really?" Slow clapping echoed from somewhere above them. They both looked up. Elizabeth Sterling stood on the mezzanine level, leaning against the railing. She wore jeans and a cashmere sweater instead of the power suits Michael had only ever seen her in. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders, instead of pulled back in the severe style she wore to board meetings. She looked younger somehow, more human, less like a weapon and more like a person. That was beautiful. Sophia's face went bright red. Elizabeth descended the stairs with the same measured grace she used for everything, but there was something softer in her movement now, less aggressive confidence and more genuine pleasure. As she approached, Michael noticed she was carrying a bag from an expensive music store downtown. "Miss Sterling, thank you for this, for everything." Elizabeth waved off the gratitude. "Please, we played piano together." "I think we're past formalities. Call me Elizabeth." She turned her attention to Sophia, kneeling down to her level. "You must be Sophia." Sophia nodded shyly. "Your dad talks about you constantly." "He does? Every time I see him this week, he mentions you. My daughter this, my daughter that." It's actually quite annoying. She said it with a small smile that made Sophia giggle. "He talks about you too." Michael's eyes widened. "Sophia, he said you're really scary, but also really nice." Elizabeth laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise her as much as it surprised them. "Did he now? He said you helped him remember why he loves piano." Elizabeth's expression softened, vulnerability flickering across her face before the armor could slam back down. "Well, he helped me remember, too." She held out the bag. "I brought you something." Sophia took it carefully and looked inside. Her eyes went huge. She pulled out a leather-bound book of Debussy's complete works, professional edition, the kind serious pianists used, the kind that cost more than Michael made in a week. "This is for me? If you want it. Why?" Elizabeth seemed to consider the question carefully, like it mattered how she answered. "Because when I was your age, my father gave me my first real music book. I lost it somewhere along the way to becoming successful. But watching you play just now reminded me how important it is to have beautiful things that inspire you." Sophia hugged the book to her chest. Thank you. You're welcome. Now, I have a question for you. Okay, do you like your piano teacher? Sophia thought about Mrs. Foster. The strict schedules, the endless repetition, the way she never accepted excuses or let you feel sorry for yourself. She's really hard. But yeah, I like her. Good. Hard teachers make great students. Elizabeth glanced at Michael, and something passed between them. Some unspoken understanding. I was thinking, if you're interested, I could arrange for Sophia to come here on Saturday mornings to practice. The building's empty, the acoustics are incredible, and she'd have access to an instrument that responds to technique in ways most pianos don't. Michael blinked, the generosity almost too much to process. That's incredibly generous. I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Sophia tugged on Michael's sleeve. Can I, Daddy? Please? Michael looked at his daughter's hopeful face, at the piano, at Elizabeth standing there with an expression that suggested she needed this as much as they did. If you're sure, I'm sure, then yes. Thank you. Elizabeth nodded briskly, shifting back into business mode like it was armor she knew how to wear. Marcus, at security, will have your names every Saturday, 10 to noon. If you need more time, just let me know. Why are you doing this? The question came out before Michael could stop it. Elizabeth met his eyes, and for a moment, the mask dropped completely. Because Tuesday morning when you played that Chopin, you reminded me that buildings full of numbers can still have souls. And because I think if my father were alive, he'd want me to help someone like Sophia. Sophia had already climbed back onto the bench and was paging through her new music book, completely absorbed. Elizabeth watched her with an expression Michael couldn't quite read. Can I try another piece? Absolutely. Sophia played something simpler this time, a short Chopin prelude. Her fingers moved more confidently now, emboldened by her earlier success and the instrument's responsiveness. Elizabeth sat down on the marble steps to listen. Michael joined her, maintaining a respectful distance that felt increasingly artificial. You didn't have to come in today. I wanted to. Why? Elizabeth watched Sophia play, her profile elegant and sad in the morning light. I've been thinking a lot this week about choices, about what I sacrificed to build this empire. Having regrets? Maybe. Or maybe just wondering if success and happiness are actually the same thing. Michael knew that question intimately. He worked as a janitor for 2 years, got promoted to a middle management position that still didn't pay enough to afford anything resembling luxury. He was broke most of the time. He slept on a couch. But he had Sophia, which meant by most people's standards, he was a failure who'd somehow won anyway. I work in maintenance. I'm broke most of the time. I sleep on a pull-out couch in a one-bedroom apartment. But I have Sophia. So by most people's standards, I'm a disaster, but I've never felt like one. Because you have something worth living for. Yeah, I'm not sure I can say the same. The admission hung between them, raw and honest, in a way that seemed to cost her something. Sophia finished the prelude and immediately started another piece, unable to stop now that she had access to an instrument that actually responded to her touch. She doesn't get tired, does she? Not when it comes to music. She has your father's gift. She has passion. There's a difference. Elizabeth considered that, turning the words over. Your mother. Did she perform professionally? Mostly, she taught. She said performing was about ego, but teaching was about legacy. Smart woman, the smartest. Do you miss her? Every single day. They sat in silence for a while, just listening. The music filled the vast space with warmth, making the corporate fortress feel almost like a home. Finally, Elizabeth spoke again. I fired someone on Thursday. Michael glanced at her waiting. He'd been with the company for 12 years, good employee, met every target, exceeded expectations consistently. But he made one mistake on a contract negotiation with our Singapore distributor, and I cut him loose. Why are you telling me this? Because after I did it, I came down here and looked at this piano and thought about you playing it, about taking a risk just to feel something real. And I realized that I've built my entire life around eliminating risk, around perfection, around never making mistakes or showing weakness. That sounds exhausting. It is. So, what are you going to do about it? Elizabeth looked at him, and in her eyes, Michael saw the same fear he felt when he thought about changing anything in his carefully balanced life. I don't know. That's the terrifying part. Before Michael could respond, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out and frowned at the screen. Unknown number again. Sorry, I should take this. He stood and walked a few steps away for privacy. Hello? A man's voice. Formal, slightly urgent. Michael Torres? Yes, this is Robert Wilson. I'm Margaret Foster's husband. Michael's heart jumped. Mrs. Foster was 70 years old. If her husband was calling on a Saturday. Is something wrong? No, nothing wrong. But Margaret asked me to call you. She has a student recital scheduled for next month at the Chicago Music Conservatory, and one of her advanced students had to drop out due to a family emergency. She was wondering if Sophia might be interested in taking the spot. Sophia? But she's only been playing for 2 years. Margaret said Sophia's been making remarkable progress lately. The recital includes students of all levels. It would be good experience. Michael thought about Sophia's struggles with Claire de Lune, about her tears and frustration, and the certainty that she wasn't good enough. What would she have to play? That would be up to Sophia and Margaret to decide together. But Margaret mentioned Claire de Lune was a possibility. Michael's stomach clenched. That piece was still so hard for her. 5 weeks wasn't enough time. That piece is really challenging for her. Margaret believes she can do it. The recital is 5 weeks away. That's enough time. Can I think about it and talk to Sophia? Of course. Just let Margaret know by Monday. After hanging up, Michael stood for a moment watching Sophia play. She looked so small at that enormous piano, so vulnerable. The thought of her on a stage in front of hundreds of people made his chest tight with protective fear. Everything okay? Elizabeth had appeared beside him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and subtle. Sophia's teacher wants her to perform in a recital, playing Claire de Lune. That's wonderful. That's terrifying. She's not ready. How do you know? Because I hear her practice every night. She struggles with it. Elizabeth smiled slightly, and Michael noticed how it changed her whole face. Struggling with something and not being ready for it aren't the same thing. Sometimes the best performances come from people who are scared but do it anyway. You sound like my mother. I'll take that as a compliment. Sophia finished her song and spun around on the bench, her earlier nervousness completely gone. That was so fun. Can I play another one? Michael checked his watch. They'd been there almost 2 hours. Actually, sweetheart, we should probably head out soon. Oh, already? It's been almost 2 hours. Sophia looked genuinely surprised. Really? Elizabeth stood, brushing invisible dust from her jeans. You can come back next Saturday, same time. I promise. Sophia jumped off the bench and hugged Elizabeth without warning. Elizabeth stiffened, clearly not used to physical affection, especially from children. But then, slowly, carefully, she hugged back, and Michael saw something in her face that looked like longing. Thank you for letting me play your piano. Thank you for reminding me it should be played. As they gathered their things to leave, Elizabeth pulled Michael aside, while Sophia was putting her music book carefully into her backpack. The recital. You should let her do it. What if she fails? What if she freezes up there, or forgets everything, or what if she doesn't? Michael started to argue, but Elizabeth cut him off with a look that was both fierce and gentle. I've spent 30 years eliminating every risk from my life, and you know what I have to show for it. An empty building on Saturdays and a piano I was too afraid to touch. Don't teach Sophia to play it safe. Teach her to be brave. Michael looked at Sophia, who was carefully zipping up her backpack with reverent hands, treating the music book like it was made of gold. You're probably right. I'm definitely right. I didn't become CEO by being wrong. He smiled despite himself. I'll talk to her about it. They took the elevator down together. In the lobby, Marcus waved goodbye with genuine warmth. See you next week, Sophia. Bye, Mr. Marcus. Outside, the October sunshine felt warmer than it had any right to be. The city looked friendlier. Michael and Sophia walked toward the train station, hand in hand. Daddy? Yeah, sweetheart. That was the best morning ever. Yeah, it was. Can we really go back next week? Elizabeth said we could. She's nice. I like her. Me too. They boarded the train. Sophia pulled out her new music book and started paging through it, her eyes wide with possibilities. Daddy, look at this one. It's called Arabesque. Can I learn it? If you want to. And this one, Reverie. That's a pretty word. It means daydream. I like that. Michael watched her lose herself in the pages, her earlier nervousness completely gone, replaced by pure joy. This was why he'd broken the rule on Tuesday morning. This moment, right here. His daughter believing in magic again. Sophia? Yeah? Mrs. Foster's husband called. She wants you to play in a recital next month. Sophia looked up sharply. Music book forgotten. A real recital? Yeah, at the Chicago Music Conservatory, in front of people. Her face went through several emotions at once. Excitement, fear, pride, panic. What would I play? Claire de Lune. Silence. Sophia looked down at her hands, turning them over like she was checking to see if they belonged to someone else. I'm not good enough at it yet. Mrs. Foster thinks you will be in 5 weeks. What if I mess up? Then you mess up in front of people instead of alone. But at least you tried. Sophia bit her lip, an old habit from when she was tiny. What do you think I should do? Michael remembered Elizabeth's words, remembered his mother pushing him to perform even when he was terrified, knowing that the only way to grow was to step into the fear and keep playing. I think you should do it. I think you should be brave. Will you be there? Front row. Promise? Promise. Sophia took a deep breath, and Michael saw her make the decision in real time. Okay. Tell Mrs. Foster yes. Michael felt a surge of pride so strong it almost hurt. That's my girl. They rode the rest of the way home in comfortable silence. Sophia studied her music book. Michael thought about the impossible kindness of strangers and the way life could shift on a single moment, a single decision, a single broken rule. When they got back to their apartment, Sophia went straight to their cheap keyboard and started practicing Claire de Lune. Over and over, the mistakes didn't frustrate her this time. She just worked through them, applying what she'd learned on the Steinway, finding new confidence in her touch. Michael made lunch, cleaned up, did laundry. Normal Saturday things, but everything felt different now. Lighter, somehow. Like a weight he'd been carrying for years had shifted just enough to let him breathe deeper. Around 3 o'clock, his phone rang again. Elizabeth. He stepped into the hallway to answer, suddenly nervous in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Hello? Michael, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. What's up? A pause on the other end, and Michael could almost hear her gathering courage. This is going to sound strange. Okay, I was sitting in my apartment just now, looking out at the city, and I realized I've been here for 12 years, and I've never actually explored Chicago. I've lived in boardrooms and offices and expensive restaurants where I meet clients, but I've never just walked around like a person. Michael wasn't sure where this was going. Okay, do you know the city well? Pretty well, yeah. Would you be willing to show me some time? Tomorrow, maybe? I'll pay you for your time, of course. You don't need to pay me, then I'll buy coffee. Michael smiled into the phone. When? Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Meet at the Bean, that big silver sculpture in Millennium Park. The what? Cloudgate. The big silver sculpture in Millennium Park that tourists take selfies with. Elizabeth laughed, and the sound was so genuine it made Michael's chest ache. Oh, yes, I've seen it from my office window, but never actually been to it. Then that's where we'll start. After they hung up, Michael stood in the hallway trying to figure out what just happened. A billionaire CEO just asked him to show her around the city she'd lived in for over a decade. It should have been strange. Instead, it felt right, like the natural next step in something that started with broken rules and honest music. Back inside, Sophia was still practicing, completely absorbed. She'd moved on from Claire de Lune to one of the simpler pieces from her new book. Who was that? Elizabeth. What did she want? She wants me to show her around Chicago tomorrow. Sophia grinned without looking up from the keys. Like a date? Not a date. Sounds like a date. Sophia, I'm just saying. She's pretty and nice, and she gave me an expensive book. That doesn't make it a date? Michael shook his head, smiling despite himself. Get back to practicing, if you say so. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Michael sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The apartment was quiet, except for the distant sounds of the city. Sirens, traffic, the upstairs neighbor's television bleeding through thin walls. He thought about the past week, about how one moment of rebellion, sitting at a piano he wasn't supposed to touch, had somehow opened doors he didn't know existed. His phone lit up with a text. Elizabeth, thank you again for today. Watching Sophia play reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. See you tomorrow. Michael typed back. Thank you for giving her that chance. See you at 10. He set the phone down and looked around their tiny apartment. Nothing had changed physically. They were still broke, still cramped, still struggling. But something had shifted internally. Some fundamental recalibration of what mattered and what didn't. For years, Michael had told himself that surviving was enough, that keeping Sophia fed and safe and loved was sufficient. Dreams were luxuries he couldn't afford. But watching his daughter play that magnificent piano today, seeing her face light up with pure joy, he realized something important. Survival wasn't enough, not for him, and definitely not for Sophia. She deserved to dream, and maybe, just maybe, so did he. He finished his coffee and pulled out his phone to call Mrs. Foster. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting. Michael, did Robert reach you? He did. Sophia said yes to the recital. Wonderful. I knew she would rise to the challenge. Mrs. Foster, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you really think she's ready, or are you pushing her too hard? Silence on the other end, longer than comfortable. Then Mrs. Foster's voice came back softer than usual, almost vulnerable. Your mother used to ask me the same thing about you. Michael's breath caught in his chest. You knew my mother. We studied together at Roosevelt University before life took us different directions. Linda Torres was the most talented pianist in our year. She talked about you constantly, about how gifted you were, about how she worried she was pushing too hard. I never knew you two knew each other. She asked me to look after Sophia if anything ever happened to her, made me promise years before she died when the cancer diagnosis came. When you called looking for a piano teacher 2 years ago, I almost told you, but I wanted to see if Sophia had the gift first. Michael's eyes stung. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you both to find music on your own terms. Not because of obligation or legacy. Your mother didn't want Sophia to feel pressure to be like her. She wanted Sophia to be herself. But the recital is about Sophia proving to herself what she's capable of, not about perfection, about courage. Your mother understood that. That's why she kept teaching, even when the cancer was eating her alive. She said music was bigger than dying. After they hung up, Michael sat in the darkness for a long time, his mother's invisible hand still guiding him from beyond the grave, still pushing him toward music even when he tried to walk away because it hurt too much to remember. He looked at the cheap keyboard against the wall, at Sophia's sheet music scattered on the couch, at the life they'd built from fragments and hope. And he smiled, because tomorrow he'd walk through the city with a woman who'd forgotten how to dream. Next Saturday, Sophia would practice on a piano worth more than their entire building. And in 5 weeks, his daughter would stand on a stage and play her heart out in front of strangers. None of it made sense. All of it felt right. Music had a way of finding you when you needed it most, even if you'd spent years trying to run away. Sunday morning came with clouds that threatened rain, but never quite delivered. Michael left Sophia with their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who treated her like the granddaughter she never had, and could always be counted on for empanadas and telenovelas. Sophia had protested only briefly before Mrs. Rodriguez mentioned fresh pastries, which settled the matter entirely. "Have fun on your date. It's not a date, sweetheart." Mrs. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow at him from her doorway, arms crossed over her floral housecoat. "It's not." She just smiled and closed the door. Michael stood in the hallway, feeling 15 years old again, nervous about meeting a girl at the movies with money he'd saved from mowing lawns. The train downtown was half empty on Sunday morning. Michael sat by the window watching the city pass by, wondering what exactly he was doing. Elizabeth Sterling could have hired any professional tour guide. She could have taken a luxury bus tour with catered lunch and historical commentary. She could have done 1,000 things that didn't involve spending her Sunday with someone who cleaned her building for a living, but she'd called him. He got off at Millennium Park and walked toward Cloud Gate, the massive silver sculpture that tourists loved and locals avoided because of the crowds. October had thinned those crowds considerably, leaving the Bean mostly empty, except for a few dedicated Instagram photographers and their patient companions. Elizabeth was already there, standing with her hands in the pockets of an expensive-looking coat. She wore jeans again and boots that probably cost more than Michael's entire wardrobe. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. Without the armor of her business suits, she looked younger, almost uncertain. "You're early." She turned and smiled, and Michael noticed it reached her eyes this time. "Old habit. I'm early to everything. Control thing. Absolutely." They stood for a moment in slightly awkward silence, two people from different worlds, trying to figure out how to exist in the same space without the piano between them as translator. "So, where do we start?" "Here's good. Have you ever actually touched the bean?" "Why would I touch it?" "Because that's what you do." He walked over and placed his palm against the smooth, cold surface. Elizabeth followed hesitantly, then pressed her hand beside his. The metal was freezing, autumn reminding everyone that winter was coming, whether they were ready or not. "It's cold. It's October. It's also kind of amazing. Look at how it distorts everything." They walked around to the center, where the sculpture curved inward and stretched their reflections into impossible shapes. A couple of kids were running in circles, laughing at their warped images in the metal. Elizabeth tilted her head, studying the way the bean bent the world. "I've looked at this from my office 1,000 times. Never realized it did this. Different perspective when you're actually in it instead of above it." She glanced at him, and something flickered in her expression. Was that a metaphor? Maybe. They continued walking through Millennium Park, past the fountains dormant now for winter, through the gardens where the last of the fall flowers were surrendering to the cold. The morning air smelled like coffee from nearby cafes and fallen leaves decomposing into rich earth. "Tell me about Sophia's mother." The question came suddenly, direct in a way Michael was starting to recognize as Elizabeth's natural mode when she wasn't performing CEO. "Why? Because you're raising her alone, and I'm curious how that happened." Michael shoved his hands in his pockets, not sure how to explain Jennifer without making her sound like a villain when she was really just someone who couldn't breathe in the life they'd built. Her name was Jennifer Hayes. We met when I was 23. She was working at a coffee shop, going to art school part-time. I was working construction during the day, playing piano in bars at night to make extra money. She used to come listen. She said I played like I was telling secrets nobody else knew how to keep. That's beautiful. She was beautiful, smart, creative, everything I thought I wanted. What happened? Life. We weren't ready to be parents. I mean, nobody really is. But we were especially not ready. When Sophia was 2, Jennifer said she felt like she was drowning, like motherhood had stolen her identity, and she couldn't find herself anymore. I tried to help, tried to take on more, but it wasn't enough. "She left?" Michael nodded, the old wound still tender even after 8 years. "One morning I woke up and she was gone. Left a note saying she was sorry, but she couldn't do it anymore. She couldn't be the mother Sophia needed. She sent money for the first year, then the check stopped. Haven't heard from her in 7 years. Does Sophia remember her? Barely. Sometimes she asks questions. I answer them honestly. Tell her that her mother loved her but couldn't stay. I don't know if that's true, but it feels kinder than the alternatives." They walked in silence for a while. The park opened onto Michigan Avenue, where Sunday morning shoppers were starting to emerge from their apartments, carrying reusable bags and expensive coffee cups. "Where to next? You hungry?" "Actually, yes. Then I know a place." He led her down side streets away from the tourist areas, into neighborhoods where the buildings were older and the signs were in multiple languages. They ended up at a small diner with steam-covered windows and a faded awning that read "Lose" in letters that needed repainting. Michael pushed open the door to warmth and the smell of bacon and coffee and home. Frank Martinez looked up from behind the counter, a massive man with a gray beard and kind eyes that lit up when he saw Michael. "Torres, haven't seen you in weeks. Been working nights. This is my friend Elizabeth." Frank's eyes widened slightly, clearly recognizing her, but gracious enough to just nod. Any friend of Michael's gets the special treatment. Sit anywhere. They found a booth in the back. The vinyl seats were cracked and patched with duct tape. The menus were sticky with decades of use. Elizabeth picked hers up and smiled, genuine and unguarded. "I haven't been to a place like this in years. Too fancy for diners now, too isolated. I eat at restaurants where people are trying to impress me, or at meetings where food is an afterthought. This is..." She looked around at the mismatched chairs and the worn linoleum floor and the regular customers who knew each other's names. "This is real. Real is usually better than impressive." They ordered. Elizabeth got pancakes like she was a kid trying something forbidden. Michael got his usual eggs and hash browns. While they waited, Elizabeth turned her coffee cup in slow circles. "Tell me about your father." Michael's turned to be surprised by directness. "Why?" "Because you mentioned he played piano, because I'm curious how someone goes from that to this." She gestured vaguely at the Sterling Technologies empire that loomed over the city a few miles away. Elizabeth stirred her coffee slowly, considering the question like it mattered how she answered. "My father was a dreamer, a musician, a poet, a terrible businessman. He tried to make it as a concert pianist, but talent isn't always enough. He ended up teaching music at a community college and playing weddings on weekends for $200 a gig. Sounds like a good life." He thought so. My mother didn't. She wanted more, wanted stability and security, and all the things artists can't usually provide. They fought constantly about money, about his choices, about whether dreams were worth starving for. Which side were you on? Neither, both. I loved my father's music, but I saw how it broke my mother's spirit. So I promised myself I'd never struggle like that, never be vulnerable like that. I'd build something solid that couldn't be taken away. And you did. Yes, but my father died before he could see it. We had a fight right before, a bad one. He told me I was becoming cold, that I was building walls instead of bridges. I told him, her voice cracked slightly, I told him he was just jealous that I succeeded where he failed. Those were the last words I said to him. 3 days later, he had a heart attack, gone before I could take it back. Michael reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The gesture was instinctive, the kind of comfort you offer to someone in pain, regardless of who they are or what they've accomplished. He knew you loved him. How can you be sure? Because parents always know, even when we're stupid, even when we say terrible things. They know. Elizabeth blinked rapidly, fighting tears she clearly didn't want to shed in a public diner at 10:30 on a Sunday morning. "I've never told anyone that story. Why tell me? Because you understand what it's like to lose someone and carry them with you everywhere. The weight of unfinished business and words you can't take back." The food arrived, interrupting the moment before it could get too heavy. Elizabeth attacked her pancakes with surprising enthusiasm. "These are incredible. Told you." "How did you find this place?" "Sophia and I used to come here every Sunday after I got paid, back when money was even tighter than it is now. Frank would always sneak her extra bacon and tell her stories about growing up in Puerto Rico. It became our tradition. Why'd you stop? Work schedule changed. Life got complicated. You know how it goes. We should bring her next time." Michael paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "Next time?" Elizabeth met his eyes, vulnerable in a way he was learning meant she was being brave. "I'd like to do this again. If you don't mind, I don't mind at all." They finished breakfast and walked back into the gray morning. The clouds were breaking up now, letting through shafts of sunlight that turned the wet streets into mirrors. Where to now? Michael thought about it. "You ever been to the Art Institute?" "Twice, both times for fundraising galas where I wore uncomfortable shoes and made small talk with donors." "So you've never actually seen it?" "What's the difference?" "Everything." They walked to the museum. Sunday admission was free, and the halls were filled with families and students and people just looking for something beautiful on a cloudy day. Michael led Elizabeth through galleries she'd walked past a dozen times during fancy events, but never actually looked at. He showed her the small details, the way light played in certain paintings, the hidden signatures artists left like secrets, the stories behind famous pieces that transformed them from decoration into communication. "How do you know all this?" "My mother. She loved art almost as much as music, said they were different languages for the same truths. She used to bring me here when I was a kid. We'd spend whole Sundays just wandering. They stopped in front of a Monet, water lilies dissolving into light and color. Not the same one Michael had mentioned yesterday, but close enough to trigger memory. She had a print of this series in our living room, right above the piano. She said it reminded her that beauty doesn't have to be solid to be real. Elizabeth stared at the painting for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. I have forgotten how to see things like this. Everything in my life is about metrics and results and quantifiable success. When did I stop believing in things that can't be measured? Probably around the same time you stopped playing piano. That's uncomfortably accurate. They sat on a bench in front of the painting, just looking. Around them, the museum hummed with quiet conversation and shuffling feet. Families pointing at art, students sketching in notebooks, people searching for connection with something larger than themselves. Can I ask you something? Michael turned to face her. Sure. Do you ever resent it? The path your life took, working maintenance, raising Sophia alone, giving up music. Michael thought about it, really thought, instead of giving the easy answer. Sometimes. Late nights when I'm cleaning offices and thinking about what might have been if my mother lived, if Jennifer stayed, if I'd made different choices. But then I go home and Sophia's asleep with sheet music on her pillow. And I remember that some paths choose us. We don't always get to pick the destination, but we can decide how we travel. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, the struggle doesn't mean anything. Elizabeth leaned back against the bench, and Michael noticed how tired she looked under the expensive clothes and perfect makeup. I built an empire, changed an entire industry, made more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And you know what I realized this week? I'm not sure any of it matters. Not the way music matters, not the way your mother's students mattered, not the way Sophia matters. Success without love is just expensive loneliness. The words hung between them, heavy with truth. Neither of them wanted, but both recognized. Elizabeth turned to look at him, and something shifted in her expression. I think I'm falling for you. I know that's insane. We barely know each other. We're from completely different worlds. But I can't stop thinking about you, about the way you see beauty in things I've trained myself to ignore. Michael's heart hammered against his ribs. I've been falling for you since you sat next to me at that piano and let yourself cry. Since you admitted you were scared and lost and didn't have all the answers. That took more courage than building any empire. They sat there in the Art Institute, surrounded by masterpieces worth millions, and neither of them could look away from each other. Elizabeth reached for his hand. I'm terrified. Of what? That this is temporary, that the world will remind us we don't make sense together, and we'll believe it. Or maybe we build our own world where different rules apply. Is that possible? Only one way to find out. They left the museum as the afternoon light was starting to fade. The temperature had dropped, and Elizabeth pulled her coat tighter. Michael wanted to put his arm around her, but wasn't sure if that was allowed, if they'd reached that point yet, or if there were protocols for whatever this was becoming. One more place, if you're okay with it. Where? It's personal, but I think you should see it. Lead the way. He took her to St. Michael's Church on the west side, old red brick with a white door that needed painting, down the stairs to the basement where his mother had taught for 40 years. The space looked exactly as he remembered. Low ceiling, concrete floor, and against the far wall, that beaten upright piano that had survived generations of students learning to translate feeling into sound. This is where my mother taught. 3 afternoons a week for 40 years. She charged whatever families could pay. Sometimes $5, sometimes a casserole, sometimes nothing but thank you and the promise they'd practice. Elizabeth walked over to the piano, ran her fingers across the chipped keys. It's beautiful. It's falling apart. Same thing sometimes. Michael sat down on the worn bench and started to play. The piano sounded terrible, out of tune and rattling, but it was the sound of home. The hymn his mother used to play at the end of every lesson, simple and honest and full of love that outlived death. She died in a hospital 2 miles from here. But this is where I feel her most. In this room, with this piano. Elizabeth stood beside him, and, when she spoke, her voice was thick. She would have liked you. How do you know? Michael stopped playing, looked up at her, because she liked people who questioned themselves. She said certainty was the enemy of growth. The most dangerous people were the ones who never doubted. She sounds wise. She was. Right up until the end, when the cancer was eating her alive, she kept teaching, kept playing. Said music was bigger than dying. Do you believe that? Michael looked at the piano, thought about all the students who'd learned here, all the lives his mother had touched with her patience and passion. Yeah, I think the things we create outlive us, the songs we teach, the students we inspire, the moments we share. They ripple out farther than we can see. Elizabeth's phone buzzed. She pulled it out and frowned. I have to take this. Work emergency. On a Sunday? Emergencies don't care about calendars. She stepped away, and Michael heard her voice shift into CEO mode. Sharp, decisive, handling a crisis with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. When she returned 5 minutes later, her expression was troubled. I have to go. There's a situation with our Singapore distributor that needs immediate attention. Okay, I'm sorry. This was really wonderful. It was. They walked back to the train in silence. The easy comfort from earlier evaporated under the weight of Elizabeth's other life. At the station, she turned to face him. Thank you for today, for showing me your world. Thank you for wanting to see it. Can I ask you something? Sure. If you could have anything, what would it be? Michael didn't hesitate. A piano for Sophia. A real one, not a keyboard that barely works. So she doesn't have to practice on something that makes beautiful music sound cheap. How much does a decent piano cost? More than I have. Elizabeth nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. I'll see you Saturday. When Sophia comes to practice, we'll be there. She hesitated, then stepped forward and hugged him, quick and awkward, like someone who'd forgotten how, but was trying to remember. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. Thank you for reminding me what it feels like to be human. Then she was gone, disappearing into the train before Michael could respond. He stood on the platform long after she left, trying to figure out what had just happened. They'd spent the day together, shared stories, connected over loss and music and the paths life forced them down. But she was still a billionaire CEO with an empire to run, and he was still someone who cleaned buildings for a living. Some gaps were too wide to bridge. No matter how much you wanted to, the thought made him sadder than it should have. When he got home, Sophia was watching a movie with Mrs. Rodriguez, surrounded by the remains of what looked like an epic snack session. How was the date? Still not a date. Did you have fun? Yeah, sweetheart. We had fun. Is she nice? Very nice. Are you going to see her again? Michael ruffled her hair. She's coming Saturday when you practice. Remember? I mean like, see her, see her. Sophia studied his face with those two wise eyes. You like her. I barely know her. You get a different look when you talk about her, all soft and sad at the same time. Michael's chest tightened. Get your pajamas on. It's bedtime. It's only 7:30. Then get ready for bed and you can read for an hour. After Sophia was settled, Michael sat on the pull-out couch and stared at the ceiling. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls too close, the future too uncertain. His phone buzzed. "Elizabeth, I can't stop thinking about that church basement, about your mother, about how she gave everything to music and students and you. I spend my days building things that will be obsolete in 10 years. She built something eternal. I'm not sure I've ever felt more like a failure." Michael stared at the message for a long time before responding. "You're not a failure. You're just measuring yourself against the wrong ruler. Your father would be proud of what you built, even if he didn't always show it." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "How do you know what to say?" "I don't. I'm making it up as I go." "Well, you're good at it." "Thanks." Another pause. "Michael?" "Yeah? I meant what I said. I'm falling for you." Michael's heart hammered. "I'm falling for you, too." He set the phone down and closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept replaying moments from the day. Elizabeth's laugh at the diner, the way she looked at the Monet, her tears in the church basement, the hug at the train station. Around midnight, Sophia appeared in the doorway, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Can't sleep?" She shook her head and climbed onto the couch beside him, thinking about the recital. Nervous? Terrified? "Come here." She curled against him, small and warm and trusting. "What if I freeze up? What if my hands shake so bad I can't play? Then you take a breath and start again. What if I forget the whole thing?" "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because you care too much." Fear comes from caring, and caring makes you practice harder. Did Grandma tell you that? She did. Sophia was quiet for a moment. "Daddy?" "Yeah? Do you think she'd be proud of me?" Michael's throat closed. "She would be so proud she'd probably embarrass you by crying in the front row." Sophia giggled, despite her worry. "Like you're going to do?" "Exactly like I'm going to do." She snuggled closer. "I wish I could have met her." "Me too, sweetheart. Will you tell me a story about her?" "Which one?" "The one about her first recital." Michael smiled. He'd told this story 100 times, but Sophia never got tired of it. "Your grandma was 12 years old when she played her first real recital. She'd been studying for 5 years, and her teacher thought she was ready for Beethoven. But the night before, she got so nervous, she threw up." "Really?" "Really. She told her mother she couldn't do it, that she'd rather die than play in front of all those people. Her mother said, 'Okay, you don't have to, but you'll always wonder what might have happened if you'd been brave.' What did Grandma do? She played, and she made mistakes, big ones. She told me she played wrong notes all through the second movement. But when she finished, the audience still applauded, and her teacher hugged her and said, 'That's the hardest thing you've ever done. Everything after this will be easier.'" "Was it?" Michael thought about that honestly. "No, but she was strong enough to handle it." Sophia yawned. "I want to be strong like her." "You already are." He carried her back to bed and tucked her in. She was asleep before he reached the door. Michael returned to the couch, but still couldn't sleep. His mind was racing with thoughts about Elizabeth, about the recital, about money he didn't have, and dreams he couldn't quite shake. Around 2 in the morning, he gave up, made coffee, pulled out the bills that needed paying, rent due in 2 weeks, utilities overdue, Sophia's piano lessons, groceries. The numbers never quite added up. He'd been thinking about picking up extra shifts, but that would mean less time with Sophia, less time helping her practice for the recital that was now only 4 weeks away. There had to be another way. His phone buzzed. Elizabeth again, apparently also unable to sleep. "Are you awake?" "Unfortunately." "Me too. Can't stop thinking about everything." About what specifically? About how I've spent 30 years building a company, and I'm not sure I've ever felt as useful as your mother did teaching kids in a church basement. Usefulness isn't the same as value, is it? Your company employs thousands of people, feeds their families, changes industries. That's not nothing. But does it matter? Really matter? Michael thought about how to answer that honestly. I think everything matters if you do it with intention. Your father's music mattered. Your mother's need for stability mattered. Your company matters. They're just different kinds of value. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just tired enough that the truth sounds smart. He could almost hear her smile through the text. Get some sleep, Michael. You too, Elizabeth. See you Saturday. Saturday. He finally fell asleep around 3, his phone still in his hand, dreaming of pianos and possibilities, and a woman who was learning to remember what it felt like to be human. When he woke 4 hours later, there was one more message from Elizabeth, sent at 4:30 in the morning. I'm scared of how much I feel for you, but I'm more scared of going back to who I was before you sat down at that piano. Michael read it 3 times, his heart doing complicated things in his chest. He typed back simply, then, don't go back, come forward with me. The week that followed felt like living in 2 timelines simultaneously. In one timeline, Michael worked his facilities manager job, helped Sophia with homework, made dinner, supervised piano practice. Normal life, steady and predictable. In the other timeline, he texted with Elizabeth late at night when neither of them could sleep. Long conversations about everything and nothing. Her fear of vulnerability, his fear of not being enough, the way they both felt like they'd been sleepwalking through their lives until something woke them up. Tuesday night, Elizabeth showed up at his apartment unannounced. Michael opened the door and to find her standing in the hallway looking uncertain, which was so unlike her CEO persona that it took him a moment to process. Hi. Is this okay? I should have called, but I was in the neighborhood and it's fine, come in. She stepped into the small apartment, looking around at the cramped space with curiosity rather than judgment. Sophia was at the kitchen table doing math homework. Elizabeth? Sophia jumped up and hugged her without hesitation. Elizabeth hugged back, less awkward than before, like she was learning. What are you doing here? I was nearby and thought I'd stop by. Is that okay? Of course. Can you help me with my math? Daddy's terrible at fractions. I'm not terrible at fractions. You told me last week that 3/4 plus 1/2 equals 4/6. Elizabeth laughed, and Michael felt something warm spread through his chest at the sound. I think I can help with that. They sat at the tiny kitchen table, Elizabeth in her expensive coat explaining fractions to a 10-year-old, while Michael made coffee. It was surreal and domestic and perfect in a way that made his throat tight. After homework was done, Sophia showed Elizabeth the music she'd been practicing. I'm getting better at the hard part. Want to hear? She went to the keyboard and played through bars 15 through 20 of Claire de Lune. Still not perfect, but stronger than a week ago. Elizabeth listened with complete attention. That was wonderful. You've been practicing. Every day. The recital is in 4 weeks. Are you nervous? So nervous I might throw up. Good. That means you care. They stayed for another hour, Elizabeth fitting into their small world like she'd always belonged there. When she finally left, Sophia was practically bouncing. She's so nice and pretty, and she's really good at math. Michael smiled. Yes, she is. Are you dating her? It's complicated. Why? Because she's a CEO and I'm a facilities manager, and the world doesn't usually let people like that end up together. Sophia considered this with her serious face. That's stupid. If you like each other, you should be together. If only it were that simple. It is that simple. Grown-ups just make it complicated. Maybe you're right. I'm always right. I'm 10. Thursday brought crisis. Michael's supervisor called him into the office with an expression that meant bad news. Torres, I need to talk to you about something. Am I in trouble? No. Actually, I got a weird call from corporate yesterday. Apparently, someone filed a formal complaint about your promotion. What? Robert Preston from Legal says there were irregularities in the hiring process for your facilities manager position, that it wasn't properly posted, or that other candidates weren't considered. He's pushing for a review. Michael's stomach dropped. Robert Preston was the CFO, the man who sat 2 seats away from Elizabeth at board meetings. This wasn't about hiring practices. This was about Elizabeth. What does this mean? Means I need to document everything, your qualifications, your performance reviews, why you were selected. It's probably nothing, but I have to take it seriously. Okay, whatever you need. Michael called Elizabeth as soon as he left the office. We need to talk. What's wrong? Your CFO is investigating my promotion, trying to prove it was nepotism or favoritism or something. Elizabeth's voice went cold. Robert, of course. This is because of us, isn't it? Probably. He's been watching me lately. Noticed I've been leaving early on Saturdays, taking longer lunches. I think he's building a case. A case for what? To remove me. The board has been restless since the Singapore contract issues. If Robert can prove I'm making business decisions based on personal relationships, he can call a vote of no confidence. Elizabeth, I can't let you lose your company because of me. You're not letting me do anything. This is Robert being Robert. He's wanted my job for years. What are we going to do? Silence on the other end, and Michael could almost hear her thinking, I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. Together. Friday afternoon, everything exploded. Michael was at work when Sarah Kim called. Mr. Torres, I'm calling on behalf of Miss Sterling. There's been a development. The board called an emergency meeting for Monday morning. They're voting on whether to remove her as CEO because of me, because of several factors. But yes, your relationship is being cited as evidence of compromised judgment. Michael felt like he'd been punched. What can I do? Nothing right now. Miss Sterling asked me to tell you that Saturday is still on. She wants Sophia to practice as planned. She said to tell you, and I'm quoting, don't you dare use this as an excuse to push me away. Michael almost smiled despite everything. Okay. She also said she'll call you tonight. Thank you, Sarah. After hanging up, Michael sat at his desk trying to process. Elizabeth was about to lose everything she'd built for 30 years because of him. Because she'd been kind enough to let his daughter practice piano. Because they'd been stupid enough to fall for each other across a gap too wide to bridge. His phone rang. Elizabeth, don't what? Don't blame yourself. I can hear you doing it from here. You're about to lose your company. I might lose my position. The company will be fine. Elizabeth, this is your life's work. No, this is 30 years of being scared. You and Sophia, that's life. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. The board meeting is Monday. If they vote me out, they vote me out. I'll survive. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, but if I lose you because I'm too afraid to fight for something real, I'll never forgive myself. Michael's chest ached. What do? We show up Saturday. We let Sophia practice. We keep living like our lives matter. And Monday, I face the board. And if they remove you, then I figure out who I am when I'm not CEO. Maybe that's not such a bad thing. After they hung up, Michael sat in the gathering darkness of his office, thinking about courage and sacrifice, and what it meant to love someone enough to let them choose you, even when it cost them everything.